right, Sean Alley, first order of business. Remind me to change the music on that countdown clock.
Well, you don't like the music?
No, I'm not into elevator music. So, welcome, Nikki and Neil. What's up, y'all?
Not much. Glad to be here with you guys.
I'm just thrilled to bits.
Oh, I can tell.
We can tell.
My favorite subject, punches and classes and ups and downs, and I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that. And the NSCA is doing it all wrong. You ought to do it this way. And what the hell is going on at the NSCA?
Wait a minute. Neil, you act like you've done this before.
Let's have it, folks.
Oh, we already got questions coming in from Dan Hill. Dan, thank you for sending that in. We're going to address questions here shortly as soon as we get started here. We're waiting on people to join us. We've already got like 20 of them right now. So, but yeah, Sean, good to see you kicking, man. All the dealing with the wife and everything's kind of had you down for a while. So it's good to see you up and kicking, buddy.
Yeah, we're moving forward, man. And we'll be seeing you up here in Ohio not too long from now.
Yep.
For the Northeast Regional.
Fly out Friday night. So this day after tomorrow. So, Nikki, I don't know how in the world Neil talked you into joining the hot seat, but thank you. Appreciate you joining us, man. It's going to be awesome having you along with us. So.
I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully everybody doesn't beat me up too much.
Nah. They save that for me and Neil. So.
Good, I'll let y'all have all of it.
You and Sean always get a pass. So.
Well, of course, Jason, Nikki is the expert on classes and furnishes, no, wrong word, gets all the complaints about, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And Nikki sorts all that out in a most political way. Correct, Nikki?
Yes, I definitely have to address all of the concerns and make sure everybody's heard and seen and feels like they're getting the best from headquarters.
Of course.
Sean, speaking of which, the EC and all the delegates just voted on raising the punches. Sean, do you have that available?
Yeah, Nikki sent this out. I think it was just earlier this week, wasn't it, Nikki?
It was within like the last, I think it was actually yesterday. I sent that out to all of the delegates.
Right.
And it's going to be going out to the membership here in the next couple of days.
Gotcha.
Actually, Sean, I think you sent it to me.
Yeah, I sent Jason a copy just for reference. It's okay for us to talk about the changes, isn't it, Nikki?
It sure is. Yes. Yeah. Like I said, it's gone out to the delegates. Everybody on that side knows about it. The membership isn't quite aware that it's gone through yet, and we'll be getting an email from headquarters soon.
So the two classes that were affected is A class, A to double A has raised from 14 to 18 punches, and double A to masters has raised from 20 to 25.
That's correct. Yes.
It's definitely a step in the right direction. What's that?
And just to clarify, that won't go into effect until January 1st of next year.
Right.
Well, I mean, while we're waiting on people to come in here, we might as well go ahead and get started with this if you guys are good with it. Let me share with everyone. I recently sent some proposals to Neil to take to the board. And Neil, I think you said your meeting is coming up here next week or the week after? Week after.
24th.
24th. Okay. So kind of exciting. And I told him to make sure and tell everybody with the EC if they liked it, that, you know, it was me that proposed it. If not, then Sean proposed it. So,
sure. Why not? Hey, and not to interrupt you before we get on to that, Jay. So Neil, I'm sure you've heard about the rule change that Nikki sent out.
Yeah.
What's your quick thoughts on that, raising the punches from going from A to double A and then double A to master? Is that going to help slow things down, help people from jumping up before they should?
Well, it should be 40 punches.
40? So Neil says even more then.
Yeah.
I agree.
You know,
Because-
but the whole punches thing needs looking at. You know, I mean, if you need 25 in next year from AA to master, why isn't it the same from C to B?
Okay.
Why to go from D to C, do you need fewer punches than AA to master? Can you answer me why?
Well, in my comment on the new change, I think it's a step in the right direction, but those 5 additional punches, all that means is I can perform well at one more event at Jack Links without moving up. I went to 2 shoots in AA after January. I went to 2 shoots and was thrown into master. So, let's dive into some goodies here. So this is the rule proposals that I sent to Neil for the classification system. So I have shooters must obtain win points in addition to their punches in order to progress to the next class. Win points are for a first place finish in their current class. And I guess I should have specified that would be for the main event. So an example, required win points to progress, like AA to master would be 5 points, A to AA. The reason why I made this proposal was because, and Sean can attest to this. We have friends that have never won ever and punched their way right up through the classes because they go to a larger shoot where they're getting, punches for second and third place, and they accumulate their punches and they're on up into a class they don't belong into. So the summary I got here is too many shooters have progressed from class to class without a single win in their profile. This results in a shooter obtaining class placement above their skill level and not being able to compete. Punches alone are too easy to obtain. With this rule change, a shooter can accumulate the punches required to advance, but not be placed in the class until they can accomplish the amount of winning scores for that class. Sean, let's start with you. What's your thoughts on that rule proposal number 1 there?
Well, I'm trying to phrase myself correctly here. Like Neil said, something needs to be done. I don't know if it's going to ever solve everything in one failed swoop. I think that, there probably should be some win points in there. But at the same time, I guess my other argument to play devil's advocate, if you constantly win second place in every shoot you're in, does that make you a bad shooter?
No, not at all. This isn't a judgment. This is just.
But I'm saying, does that make you not worthy of gaining punches and moving up? You know what I mean? Because if you're in a competition where there's, say, 50 people, you're at a larger event, you're at a Jack Links or a state shoot or something, probably even more than that.
You mean 50 in your class? Yeah,
if there's 50 in your class and you are able to punt, if you're able to place second, third, fourth, even, I mean, you're definitely a good shooter, right? So I guess you just have to be real careful about how critical you are of the wins. Win points are great. I myself personally have never won. I don't think I've ever won a tournament HOA ever, and I've been shooting since 2017.
Well, this doesn't have to do with HOA. This is just class wins.
Well, I know. I'm just saying, but that's okay. But it's a class win. Even I had one that I don't know. I mean, again, I think it's a step in the right direction, but there's a lot of variables. Is the only thing I see. Well,
as an example I have here, recently at a large event with more than 45 shooters in a class, in all events within the tournament, a shooter obtained 15 punches, me,
right,
without placing in a podium finish. Now the said shooter is placed in a much more advanced class, Masters, and feels they cannot be competitive and thus pulls out of shoots. This costs the clubs and in a larger picture, the NSCA funding. Now, what you were just saying, I would have been just fine and happy without obtaining punches. All the money that was available at that shoot, I didn't come within the money. None. Right. $0. And I still earned enough punches to get thrown in masterclass. I almost feel like I was penalized. So
and I agree. I mean, that situation is probably a little more rare. I mean, I know it happened to you, so I get it. It can happen, but that's probably a very small margin of things happening. I mean, I've seen lots of people that have gone to a big tournament and punched out of a class, pretty quickly. So it does happen, but I don't think it's as common as what a lot of people might think. But yeah, there needs to be some kind of safety protocol, or maybe, again, the way you're writing it here, I think it's pretty good. You just need to be able to put the brakes on it. So if you go to one tournament, you don't get necessarily thrown up into the next class. I'm not sure exactly how the best way of doing that is, but I think that what you've got here is a good start. Definitely a good conversation to have.
Well, those win points would be in addition to the punches.
Right.
So you'd still have to get your required punches and then have win points. Nikki, you've heard us stewing on this for a second. What's your thoughts on it? I mean, what do you think about this proposal?
So I actually want to play devil's advocate with it a little bit.
Okay.
And that's because I hear this a lot. So I want to use very specifically your AA to master class. So you're earning all of these punches. You need more win points. You get to 4 win points and you need one more win point before you have to bump up to master. And it's a lot easier for somebody to throw a first versus runner up and keep themselves in AA and not have to move up and consistently be at the top of class without punching up into master. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That would, the opposite would actually kind of be my concern with this. Because you guys hear it all the time. Well, I'm not going to go shoot the monthly tournament because I don't want to punch up before this or before that. Right. And we're starting to hear more and more of that kind of stuff and complaints from other shooters about, that kind of thing going on. So while I think I don't disagree with the idea at all, we definitely have to put, some thought into how to make it work for the best for both sides.
Yeah. Neil, what's your thoughts on it? You've been sitting on this letter I sent you for a few months now. I don't know how much you've had time to review it, but what do you think about this?
I've read it, Jason, but I think it's a load of bull crap.
Okay.
Win points. Give me a break. Why don't you just... The easiest thing to do is if you win your class, you get X number of points. If you come second, you don't get any.
Yeah.
Right. So if you constantly win your class, then you get X number of points until you reach the threshold, and then you go up a class. Now the guy that's consistently second, maybe in Sean's case, because he comes second a lot, maybe he can win.
Yeah.
Now, Neil, do you give any weight at all to when we're talking about that, do you give any weight at all to the type of tournament? So if somebody goes to a local tournament and they go, if they're in AA, and let's say they go to a local tournament here in Ohio where there might be 25 to 30 shooters, do you give any weight to that versus, say, going to a regional where there might be 100 or more people in that class?
I think you have to, unlike it's done now. If you look at the regionals, let's say, and I know we've got it, where is it? If it's over, what's the number, Nikki? If it's over, you get more punches. Is it,
it breaks down. It's go ahead, Nikki.
No, yeah, I was going to say, so it breaks down. You've got 10 to 14 in class, 15 to 29, 30 to 44, 45 or more.
Okay, 45. Whoever thought of that number must be nuts. It should be a lot higher than that, especially for when we talk about not necessarily states, but certainly regionals, US Open and nationals. You ought to win a load more points if you place first in your class at any of those type of shoots. By default, there are a ton more people in those events than there are in, let's say, our local monthly registered shoot.
Yeah,
I agree.
And I guess I should have prefaced all this. The comment that I heard that, unfortunately, I don't think you can disagree with, the way our current class system is, eventually everybody's going to end up in master class. I mean, it's just the way it goes. You know, Neil, you talked about the guy that's winning all the time gets bumped up, and now all of a sudden the guy in second is going to be winning all the time. He's going to get bumped up. It's just a
Yeah.
trickle up effect.
But it is anyway.
Yeah.
It is
I get
anyway.
that.
You know, up until last year, I guess Masterclass might have been our highest, the most participants in class. Masterclass for 25, there was the lowest number of members were in Masterclass. 2,250 members in Masterclass. Guess how many there was in Class D? Any idea?
I have no idea.
15,000. That's 15,475.
Really?
Wow.
Right? In Class C, 7,829. Class B, 3,666. Class A, 2,866. And Class AA, 2,693. So you can see there, and of course, a lot of that may be taken up with no E-Class because they would have been, I guess, moved up to D.
Yeah.
But I mean, your assumption is correct. By default, even if you're a shit shooter, by default, at some point, you're going to move up in class.
Right.
That's just the nature of the business. We need to look more at dropping people in the bottom of the class back down a class to keep the numbers in the various classes somewhat, I'm not going to say even, I don't think they need to be even, but to people that don't necessarily deserve or need to be or can compete in the class that they're in, if they're in the bottom 10%, 15%, perhaps they should be dropped down into the class below and see if they're competitive there. In the lower class, I dare bet that the people that are winning in that class would beat the people that have just dropped down a class.
Yeah. Let's get caught up on some of these questions real quick before we move to the next proposal. Dan says, is there a way to penalty someone up a class from the standpoint of the standings in the event? So in other words, and I think, well, we'll address that part of his question here on the next proposal, but not also penalize them for earning punches in their actual class. This is when they do not have enough registered targets going into the event. So that currently exists. Nikki, do you want to address that?
So I believe what he's referring to is our current penalty class, which exists for the state shoot, regionals, US Open and nationals. And if you don't have enough targets going into the shoot, then you get placed one class higher than what your current classification is. If you earn a punch shooting at that event in that higher class, then that holds you in that higher class. If you don't, then you just go back down to the class that you were in.
And then we got one here from Anthony. This is a little off topic. It says, has there been discussion about scores being posted on multi-day events on Score Chaser after everyone shoots in a sport that you can pick your own squad? Just curious. So now I know in discussion about scores being posted on Score Chaser. Now I know that Score Chaser updates the scores every night from larger events like regionals and opens and the nationals. I don't know if that's what he's referring to or not.
Yeah. I mean, it's real time. It's updating after every rotation.
Yeah.
Right.
John says, hello all. My question is, I had one punch last year in E class, then I got moved to D class. I lost that punch. I thought they carried over. So now I know they don't for the rest of the classes, but Nikki, when they moved everybody from E up to D, they didn't get their carryovers?
No, because those punches were earned in a different class. So even though, yes, a large group of people moved up from E to D, they're still competing with people that were currently D class and earning punches in D class. So it just wouldn't mesh right, you know, carrying E class punches up into D class because you didn't earn them shooting against that same ability.
Right. And
Well,
then
I
we've
think the
got
same thing, not to interrupt Jason, but I think the same thing applies to, say, a person only needs to gain 1 punch to move to the next class. If you go to an event and you win 4 punches, you don't get to carry over those extra 3 into your new class, correct, Nikki?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, every time you move, whether it's up or down, but every time you move in class, you start back at 0 because it's a different class, different ability level.
Right.
okay. Let's move on to this next one because I think this is going to generate a lot more ideas too. So the next one is class placement at regionals, US Open, and nationals. A shooter's eligibility to compete in their class at regionals, US Opens, is determined by their CCFR from shoots within their home state. So, in other words, Sean Alley's over here shooting a Cardinal Center and Eagles Nest every weekend, and his CCFR in master class is too high. So it says here if a shooter's CCFR is too high, the shooter will be placed in a lower penalty class. The same rule would apply at the national championship with the shooter's class eligibility based off CCR from any regional or US Open they competed in. So, Sean, and this is what I'm getting at here with this proposal, he would not lose his placement at a local level. He would still be a master class shooter. However, his CCFR is too high. So if he goes to a regional, an open, or a national, he's going to be master competing in AA. This would keep the shooter that made master class by shooting their local club from being placed in masters in a major shoot, whereas they would not be competitive. Therefore, they would compete in AA as AA-M. They would still be a master class shooter only competing in AA because they did not score well enough to be eligible. They can have the option to decline a penalty class. So if Sean wants to go to the US Open and compete in masters, go for it, buddy. But if not, if he wants to stay competitive, he would be downclassed into AA. Example of this is a master class shooter is dominant at their local club. However, when they attend the national championship, they cannot place any higher than 250th place. I've seen this a million times. This gives said shooter a chance to be competitive. This would vastly increase attendance at all of the tour stops and increase revenue for clubs and ultimately the NSCA. So, I think there was over 700 shooters in masterclass last year at the national championship. Of those 700 shooters, I can guarantee more than half of them would have loved to be competing in AA.
Yep.
Nikki, you went dark. I hope you're still with us. There you are.
Wait, John's got a question. Or Neil's got a question. Sorry, Neil.
Neil, go ahead, Neil.
So start the discussion on that then, you two. So what you're telling me is that if somebody just at local events has a CCFR of above 0.4, for the big tournaments, you want to drop them down a class?
I don't know what that number would be. It could be a 0.5. It could be a 0.6. I don't know.
Regardless, but you want to drop them down a class. So now, what does the guy that's a genuine AA class shooter think about a master class shooter dropping down a class and being in AA? Why are you penalizing the AA shooter?
Well, and it would be the same for him for all classes, not just masters. But
I understand that. Same. So if somebody's in AA and gets below or above that CCFR, then you drop them down into A. Now the A class shooter is being penalized by having a AA shooter in his class.
Real
He
quick,
makes a valid point.
So real quick, Mitch, CCFR is current class finishing ratio. Before I put this on paper, I went and looked at the scores. The top 50 in AA were as good, if not better, than the top 100 master. The top 50 in AA would have placed them within the top 100.
Yep.
So before I put this on paper, I'm like, I don't want to sound stupid or just make it sound like it's about me because it's not. So I went and looked at those scores, and if you look at the score, the guy that's in, I don't know, whatever place, Neil, let's say he's got a CCFR and master class of 0.5. he's probably not going to compete in the top 50 of AA.
I understand that, Jason, but you're still penalizing those people in AA. Let's use AA as an example. You're still now, okay, so the top, however many you said, did not compete with double master, did not compete with the people, the AA people beat that group of masters. You move those master people down. Now the guy halfway through the pack in AA now is competing against the master. So in your statement, you said that the increased revenue for clubs and ultimately the NSCA. Now, if I'm a AA shooter and now I've got some, not, and there won't be many, masterclass shooters coming down there and I'm middle of the pack shooter in AA, well, you've just now made it harder for me to work my way up to the top of AA, even though typically I'm not going to beat those higher AA shooters. But now you've just added another obstacle in the way.
Nikki, what's your thoughts on this?
I definitely agree with Neil on this. The shooter that's just above the move down point is going to get highly frustrated, agitated, because now you've brought down people on top of them that are better than they are, whereas they maybe thought they had a fighting chance, but now they're going to just get completely discouraged because they're not only dealing with the people that were better than them in class that they're trying to do better than, but now you're bringing people down further and pushing them down even further.
Yeah, I did consider that, and again, I kept going back to what the scores were. You know, I mean, I don't think you're going to affect the guys at the top of each class.
Well, and I completely get where you're coming from, and you're coming from a very good standpoint, but we have to remember that the people that are trying to move up in class, the ones that are already there, I get that they're frustrated about not being competitive at the big shoots, but we definitely don't want to penalize the guys that are still trying to move up in class. I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of a horse apiece. You're taking one for the other.
And Nikki, let me ask this question. I don't know how much this is related or not, but you know, obviously, with all the new rule changes with downclassing and stuff that have happened recently, there are still people. Everybody can still deny the down class every year, correct? So they don't have to be moved back if they petition the NSCA and say I don't want to be moved back.
That's correct.
Hypothetically, I mean, and I don't know if you know this or not, do you have any idea what the percentages of master class shooters who refuse the down class that still decide to stay in master, even though they've been officially down class because of their performance?
I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I will say one very interesting fact that I've noticed is more people, since we've actually increased the number of people moving down, more people are accepting the down class.
Okay, so before it was maybe a pride issue that they didn't want to get bumped out, but now that they're seeing that everybody else is pretty much going too, then they're saying, okay, well, I guess I'll go back down.
Yeah, I've actually been surprised since we started doing that at how many people like they've opted out of the end of year or review altogether, and they're calling me back and saying, you know what, I want to opt back in. Can you go ahead and do a target review on me because now I feel like the classes are being a little bit more competitive.
Well, I'm just saying, from a guy that's gone from AA to master to AA to master back to AA this year. I mean, it's and Jason too. I mean, it's kind of a yo-yo thing, right? You're just like, I just put me somewhere that I stay. That I don't necessarily want to go back to master class. I have no problem getting bounced back to AA because that's
right.
And that's kind of what this leans towards. You know, the guy that has no problem getting downclassed would love this rule, right? And here's the other side of the coin. You know, Neil, you're like, well, why would you want to penalize the guys in the lower class? It's no different than Sean Alley and I being thrown into master class. No different. We can't compete with those guys. Ain't no way in hell. But here we are. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I mean, I guess I understand. And this would have to be something that, I don't know. I don't even know if you're even going to propose it, Neil. I have no idea. So,
but okay, let's take you as an example. All I've heard so far is that you want to move down in class so that you can be more competitive and earn money.
Not necessarily about the money.
Well, it's got to be.
Well, I mean,
Right, because if you're in masterclass, you're never going to win anything in masterclass.
Yeah, personally for me, it's not about money. It never has been. I
No,
rarely
and it
play
shouldn't.
into class.
It shouldn't be. I mean, for apart from the top pros, that earn a living, if you happen to win your class at a major shoot, whatever, wherever, then think of that as an added bonus and an achievement. There's so many other awards that you could aim towards, all the different teams, the Krieghoff team, the Briley subgauge team. There's any number that state teams, regional teams. There's any number of where you could strive to attain to be a member of that team. And of course, the ultimate is to be a member of Team USA, whether it be for sporting or FITAS. That's the ultimate goal. And that should be the people that are competitive. That should be their ultimate goal. It shouldn't be about money.
no, to be fair, Neil, it really isn't about money with me, because if you added up every single cent I've ever got from a shoot since I started shooting registered tournaments, you couldn't buy a flight of shells. So
Me too.
it's definitely not about money. It's just I just want to be. You want to be competitive, right? Like, I mean, the whole reason we compete instead of just shooting around on Sunday and going to lunch is because we want to be competitive, and that's why I spent the time doing this, is because I want to help make it so it is more competitive for everybody, I guess. Move on to this third one if you guys want to. I don't know, Neil. I mean, I can definitely see you and Nikki's side of it 100%. I don't know, that might not be something that's feasible. Rule proposal number 3 is increase the reviews to every 6 months.
There you go again. You want to change it to every 6 months so that you can go down. It's the same old bullshit.
I love you, Neil.
Oh my gosh. Okay, you want me to skip this one, Neil?
I get a chance to go down a class once a year. Well, let's make it twice just for Jason.
No, oh my God.
So I'm going to speak to this one.
Okay.
We're gonna cut Neil out for a second. So
I can mute him if you want me to.
so when we do the bulk reviews, currently the end of year review, it actually is a really big process for us at headquarters that complicates things for shoots that are going on, and it actually messes up classification that you're currently shooting at a shoot, and then all of a sudden we down class you and you realize, oh, I got down class, but I shot in the wrong class. To me, the answer to this is always every single member can email me, and I'm going to regret saying this because I'm going to get bombarded by emails tomorrow, but every single member can email me at any given day and request a classification review. You don't have to wait 6 months. You don't have to wait till the end of the year. If I had my way, the end of year review would go away because it actually messes up more things for the members, for Score Chaser, for us, and just let everybody, if they want to be reviewed, let them request a review.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I better not hear Neil complain on this one, because this goes right back to what he said at the beginning of the show here. Rule proposal number 4, vastly increase the number of punches required to move up in class and decrease punches awarded at larger classes. There you go, Neil. I don't want to hear any complaints because you already said both of these things. Master class would be for the professionals of the sport, while pro classes establish the elite. There are still scores and masters that would not place top 5 in B class. That is 100% true. Summary. AA to masters, 40 punches, 25, 16, 10, 7. And then here's the other thing too, is larger shoot punches awarded. So this changes it. This goes back to what we were saying earlier, which is vastly different than what's there now. So what's your thoughts, Neil? This is right up your alley for what you were saying.
I love it.
Okay. So
I
we'll
love
be
it.
no.
But
Okay, there we go, Sean. We know this one's going to go in front of the EC.
But explain to me, explain to me if you would. I'm in D class and I only need 7 punches to get to C class.
Okay.
Why?
Well, this is just a proposal. So you
I
guys
understand that, but you put it together. What was your thinking behind that? Why are the number of punches not the same all the way down that list?
Good idea, Neil. I like it. I didn't think of it when I typed it.
Well, I wonder though. I mean, and again, I'm just playing devil's advocate. I have no dog in this fight. At the lower classes, tends to be a larger shooting base, right, Neil? Even like you just said that so you reduce the number of punches required to at least give more people a fighting chance to feel like they're moving up and progressing through the class. You know what I mean? You make it harder the higher up you go, and a little bit less hard at the entry levels and the middle levels. I mean, does that make sense or not really?
Yeah, it does, but why do we need to make it easier just because I'm a D class shooter? We don't, do we? I mean,
Well, right now you only need 4 punches to go from D to C.
right.
Right.
I know, but Jason is proposing 7. But why?
Well, I just tried to break it out proportionally.
Yeah.
And move down the classes. I mean, trust me, those numbers need adjusted. I'm not any kind of an expert on that, but.
And I understand the theory behind it. The higher you go up, the more difficult it is to punch up to the next class. But why? Why are we doing that?
Well, I guess is one way we need to look at, like, okay, so you've got the punches and you've got the CCFR, right? So you got 2 different things. If you were to eliminate all the classes altogether and actually stack people in classes based solely on their CCFR, do you think there would be a lot fewer masterclass shooters than there is now?
I haven't got a clue.
Nikki's nodding her head yes. So, I would say the majority, like you have, I don't know how many people there are competing in sporting class. I would say the majority of people are probably 75% shooters or below, right? They break 75 targets on a 100-bird tournament most of the time, or less than that. That's probably better than half or more, maybe 60% of all shooters that compete in the sport. And then when you go up from there, the next tier is maybe, call it 85, that's or 80. And then you go to 85 and then 90. I mean, just based on scores alone and your CCFR, it's a lot harder to shoot a 94 or a 95 on a 100-bird tournament than it is to shoot a 72 or a 75. So with that kind of reasoning, you would think the majority of people are going to shoot scores in the 60s and the 70s that are new to the sport or they don't compete very often. So maybe make that a little less difficult. If they start shooting into the high 70s, which is typically what happens when you punch out of, D to C or C to B, and you're starting to get into the 80s now, maybe make that just a little bit easier because of that fact, based on the scores that they actually shoot and not the punches that they actually win. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see where you're going with it, but now you're drawing in a lot of other factors into that. The other thing that we haven't discussed is that the guy that shoots at his local club or is registered monthly, he shoots 85. I don't know what class he's in, doesn't matter. But then he goes to another shoot out of state that he hasn't perhaps been to before, or he goes to a regional or a state shoot, whatever it might be. And instead of sort of shooting 85s, now he shoots 72.
Mm-hmm. And that's typical.
And that's typical because the degree of, not necessarily difficulty of targets, varies so much across the country. A lot of the club owners will make their targets somewhat easier for their monthly shoots because that's their bread and butter. They They want
Exactly.
the customer to come back. They want the customer to have a good time. And yep, I can shoot 85 round Sean's club, you know, then a month or so later, he go, you know, I'm getting good at this. I'm going to venture out a little bit and I'm going to go to Jason's club, which is in the next state. And it's a state shoot. I'm not necessarily a regional, and gets clobbered. And he goes, Jesus, what the hell happened? So,
Seen it happen a lot.
yeah, you know, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing because the country is so vast. In the UK, typically, and it's just, and I remember I haven't been back there for over 30 years now. I've been back, but the country is so small that most of the targets are similar. I'm not saying they're all the same, but they're very similar in degrees of difficulty. So the CPSA can use an average for, you know, for putting in classes, whatever it might be. If you get an average score of 92 or above, you're in AAA or whatever. They haven't got a master class. I can't remember. So taking the target difficulty into account, it becomes very difficult then to judge how somebody can shoot based on their score.
Yeah, I understand. Again, it's not a perfect system, and I mean, you can go into further into the weeds and say, okay, well, the tournaments that they throw in Texas, Georgia, Florida, and Ohio are typically tougher than the tournaments they throw in South Dakota and Idaho. You know what I mean? Because there's more shooters there. You know.
Yeah. And I'm not saying we should change anything or anything because it's all part of the learning experience. You know, people go to a regional or something and go, wow, we don't throw targets like this at our local club. I've heard it many times when I've been at a regional or certainly nationals, you know, wow, didn't know we could do this sort of thing, you know. So, I mean, we're on the right track, but again, how do you make it fair for everybody across for all the membership? You know, the membership now is growing steadily. We're at 34,797 members, which is pretty good, guys. Pretty good.
Let me run through this last idea here real quick, and then I just want to open it up to people's questions or comments or ideas. Group proposal number 5: make prelims at larger shoots a qualifier in the main event. Each shooter attending any of the tour stops must shoot the prelim as a qualifier for the main event. Based off the highest score, on-site CCFR can be calculated for each class and a cutoff for the number of classes. Any shooter not shooting well enough to qualify for their class will be downclassed for that event only. And I'm not going to go through the summary and example and all that, but you know, this is the only sport that I know of that doesn't have a qualification process. I mean, you take motorsports, for example. I don't care if you're Dale Earnhardt, you don't just show up and get in the main event. You have to qualify. You know, I don't care if you're, you know, in supercross, motocross, and football, basketball, baseball, golf, whatever it is, you have to qualify. Here, you just sign up and you're shooting. I mean, so I don't know. This was just an idea of more of like a qualifier to get into a said class for a main event. Now, this would only apply to, you know, regionals and opens and nationals. Wouldn't apply to every shoot. But we've already got Rule 5 is my favorite. Thanks, Anthony. But let's just go down the list here, Sean. What's your thoughts on this? Is the prelim being a qualifier?
My only concern would be, are people going to take advantage of that and sandbag to go back to a class? You know what I mean? Could they purposely throw the prelim in order to go back a class to be more competitive, especially when there's money and stuff involved? Like you take the Jack Links where there's such a large purse, and a master class shooter goes out there and throws the prelim in order to register for the main. Does that set a bad precedence for the ability to go back and it's like now he's competing in double A?
Put more money in the prelim than the main. Then they're going to go for it. I don't know. This is just an idea.
I mean, I know where you're coming from. I'm just saying that it's like anything. There's a good side and a bad side to it, and that's the only. I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate. That's the only thing I see is that if you trust in people to be honest, there's always going to be somebody that's going to push the rules and not, and try to find an advantage.
And it will happen without a doubt.
Neil?
I think, I get where you're going, but this is the beauty of our sport. I can join the NSCA tomorrow and I can go to a tournament on Saturday and I can shoot with the best in the world. I can shoot shoulder to shoulder with Brandon Powell. I might not know who he is if I've just joined the NSCA, but you see where I am with. I see it all the time where there is arguments with people. Are we a sport or are we a hobby? Well, we're both. As soon as you apply rules to and follow a rule book, you become a sport. The weekend warrior that goes around and shoots, with their buddies and that, it's a hobby. But the people that shoot the hobby, I dare bet they're itching to become a member of the NSCA or some organization where they can compete, not against their buddies, because they want to see how good they are. So I would disagree with that. What I would propose instead of rule number 5 would be to have a super final where
I like super finals.
Where you qualify from that. Now, super finals typically have been for, let's say, masterclass, the top 10, whatever it might be. I would like a super final for every class where they would qualify with their score that they shoot in the main event. That way you're not penalizing anybody by saying, well, hold on a minute, guy, you can't shoot in the main event unless you shoot the prelim and qualify. Well, F you. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pay my money. I want to shoot in the main event because I want to see if I can qualify for the super final. And we've spoken about this before. It's doubles up as shoot offs as well, because it takes care of all that. It needs some thought. I like what Greater Houston has done. Their shoots, they finish on a Saturday and have shoot offs on a Sunday. Well, I'm not saying that we can always do it at nationals, but there's ways around with a bit of rethinking and stuff like that. But my thought on Rule 5 would be have a super final instead of a qualifier for the main event.
That's an excellent idea. I love it. I mean, all you need is 3 cages and 25 targets. Put the top 10 from every class through it. You know what I mean? And finish up with the super squad or whatever you want to, however you want to stage it for a big show. But then not only as far as fairness and rules and all that stuff goes, but you're also creating one hell of a spectacle for everybody.
Yep.
Everybody can sit and watch the shoot offs for all the classes right in front of them. I think that'd be super cool. I'd love that idea. Well, what do you think, Nikki? What's your thoughts on a super final?
I just thought that my Sunday night at Nationals got really, really long. It's definitely not a bad idea. The logistics would definitely have to be worked out on something like that.
Yeah. But, I guess Nationals is a great example. And Sean, you know what I'm talking about. You've been down there and helped me film it, where they have the North versus South and they have the Top Gun shootout on Friday night. Those 3 cages right there in the stadium, you could set the targets up, 25 birds super final for D through master or D through super squad, and just run them through there. And wow, how awesome. I would go down and watch every bit of that. I would love that. Hopefully I'm in it, but how cool. What's your thoughts, Sean? You like it?
I like the idea. Like I said, just again, logistics and all that other stuff just depends on how it's all played out and how it works. And, you don't want to drag out the tournament and make it an extra, 6 hours longer than it needs to be. Like Nikki wants to go home at some point, and everybody else does too. So I see the reasoning. I see the logic. I just logistics are going to be the key kicker.
Well, it's like everything else. I think if you plan it accordingly. You guys want to go down through some questions here?
Yeah, I wanted to pick out one if I could, Jason.
Go for it. Tell me which one to pull up.
It's Michael Chiaffi from 9:09 p.m. He made a really good comment when we were talking about, like when Neil mentioned, like, why do you have fewer punches to go from, D to C and so on and so forth. D class in many events I've been beat will beat CBA scores, yada yada yada. And you know what? So maybe the reason that we have less punches in the lower classes is to allow the better shooters in those classes to pass through quicker. Get them out of there so that the actual talent, that's in D to stay competitive. You always get new shooters. That I've seen it, and you've seen it too, Jason. You get somebody new that joins the NSCA. They're not new to shooting necessarily. Maybe they were a trap shooter. Maybe they practiced in high school or something. Who knows? But they come into D class, and all of a sudden they're shooting 10 or 12 birds higher than most of the people, and they punch out like this. They're out one or two tournaments.
And a really good example of this, Sean, if you think about it, every year we shoot the SCTP benefit shoot. It's during the SCTP Nationals. They have a NSCA registered target shoot. And if you think back years ago, Sean, we would be in B and A class and stuff. And all of a sudden, we think we're doing good in the tournament. And it's like, who are these names and where did they come from?
Yeah, they just come out of the blue, and they're like 5, 6, 7, 8 targets ahead of everybody else, miles ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
That's it. He makes a really good point there, doesn't he?
He does, yes.
I didn't think of it in that aspect where he can go in as a D class shooter, or somebody can go in as a D class shooter and beat those 3 classes. Exactly as you said. He's not new to clay shooting. He's probably been shooting all his life. Excellent bird hunter, and he just pops. He's going to be up in masterclass before he knows it. So that does make sense, that then you need or give them, or they require fewer punches to get out of the lower classes up to a class where they should actually belong.
They should be more competitive in a higher class. Yeah. And then Mitch here says he commented on Michael's comment there. He said, I am new and I haven't started competing yet, but I pay attention to the scores in my local, and almost every month someone from D or C scores a number that would be top 3 in A or AA. So yeah, absolutely. Yep. Same point.
We've seen that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Sean, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. Last year, when the EC made the proposal to drop those punch requirements, that is exactly why they did that.
It makes sense.
I wasn't on the EC last year, Nikki.
No, we weren't fortunate enough to have you yet.
So what they're saying is the EC didn't have to listen to a bunch of bitching last year. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
Neil. I'm just kidding.
No.
I'm just teasing you, buddy. I'm just teasing you, Neil. Don't get mad at me.
Be nice to Neil. Be nice to Neil.
I'm not.
Scott said target setters seem to set targets to protect against someone running the course rather than thinking about the average shooter that does not do it for a living. And this has been talked about.
Neil's shaking his head.
Yeah.
I don't know where he gets that from. He must have had his head in the sand. There's a couple of clubs that like to set more difficult targets, but on the whole, I don't care if people run my courses. I mean, it would be excellent shooting, which is, sorry, I don't know. He's wrong on that thought.
Sean, help me out here. You seen anything else?
I'm scrolling back down. Those were good discussions and good comments, I thought.
Steve said, when we try to make things better, we usually really mess things up even more sometimes, but there is Mickey, you deal with this every day. I mean, it's probably the most talked about, most controversial thing in our sport is the classification system. Would you agree with that?
Without a doubt. And I believe it'll never be perfect, but I do think that the steps that we're taking now are improving it. And to Steve's comment, we're taking baby steps so that we don't make a mess out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go all in, and I'll be honest with you, when we talked about increasing the A to AA and AA to master, Michael and I proposed a higher number to the EC, and the EC was conservative for this reason, so that we're not making big jumps, inevitably making potential mistakes. We'd rather go a little bit slower and do things right than make a mess.
Yeah. I skipped this one on accident, didn't mean to. It says, wouldn't taking away the ability to refuse down class solve some of the classification issues? Neil's pondering over there.
Personally, I'll jump out here and say it. I love that idea. I
What's
think
that?
if you're going to make the sport respectable and you're going to make the class system mean something, then people have to play by the rules. And if you're not good enough to stay in the class that you're shooting in, whether that's because you didn't have enough time this year to practice or get out and do stuff, or B, you're getting older, maybe your eyesight's going a little bit, maybe your reflexes are going a little bit. I mean, there's a host of different reasons why people start shooting lower scores. And again, I think that to legitimize the sport even more, and maybe a lot of people won't want to hear this, be realistic. If you can't make the score and you can't shoot the average, then go back down to the next class. I mean,
Yeah.
it's only a pride thing, right? It's a pride thing only.
Yeah.
To be downclassed and not
But
like
what they're saying, they wouldn't taking away the ability to refuse a down class. So they're saying refuse the down class. I don't want to go down. I want to stay in master.
no. Take away the ability to refuse. So that means if a master class got bumped down last year, they can still write to the NSCA and say, I refuse to be down class.
In other words, you can't say, I don't want to go down.
Exactly. And I'm all for that.
Totally agree with that. I mean,
Yes.
that's, yeah. If you,
Yeah.
But then there's, and unfortunately I see it. A lot of people spend a lot of money to get into masterclass.
I agree.
I've spent and I've done my dues and I've shot tournaments and I've shot regionals and stuff like that. And I've got the punches. I'm in masterclass. That's where I want to stay. I know I'm never going to win anything in masterclass, but I'm a masterclass shooter.
Is there some way we could designate, again, to me, it's a pride thing. And I get it. You spend a lot of money to get there and time to get there. Is there a way to designate, okay, I am a AA shooter competing as a former master? I don't know how you do it. I mean, again, to me, it's kind of silly because it's like, look, Jack Nicklaus at one time was the best golfer in the world, but he's not going to go out there today and compete against
drag oxygen bottles up on,
right?
drag oxygen bottles up on the tee box.
I mean, there's a time, Neil, when I'm sorry, we all get old enough to where it's like we're not competitive anymore. I used to play football and knock heads around, and I could go out there and die if I tried to do that today. So I'm realistic,
Yeah. But I agree. I agree. Yes, if they should move them down, and I think there should be a percentage of people in class that go down from each class until you get, obviously D is the lowest, but at the same time, the people from the classes, any class, are going up.
Yeah. We got another one here from Anthony. Says, and Nikki, I want you to comment on this because I believe this was discussed at one point previously in the EC. What if you added scoring average to the rank system, similar to Jason's pitch, but they would have to average 90 plus for masters, 85 for AA, 80 plus for A, and so on. Now, I understand that the CCFR kind of does that to an effect, but what's your thoughts on that?
So the average system, for example, like how they have it in ski, it's actually easier to sandbag versus the punch system. Because I brought that up to a couple of people and I was told, nope, what y'all have is actually more fair for the classification system than an average is. Now, and it also plays into target difficulty, kind of like what Neil was saying. Over in England, they have more of an average of target difficulty, whereas here you can shoot in Austin and a master class is shooting in the 70s, low 80s. And then tomorrow you can go to Copperhead Creek and shoot 95. And that's going to completely skew averages too.
Yeah. Well,
So-
you know, I mean, it's the same. That kind of goes back to what Neil was saying, where, you know, a guy goes to his local club and he's shooting an 85 average, and then he goes to a regional or a US Open and gets smoked with the 65. There, it's going to pull his average way down just because he went to a big tournament. You know?
Mhm.
There's a way of doing it though, because you could have a weighted average. The winning score, let's say, is 95. Then the average is based on 95, not 100.
Like a curve.
Yeah. So a bell curve, so that you could then, it doesn't matter then how difficult or easy the tournament is. Your average is based on what the winning score was. So, I mean, and that could be done, you know, and we're saying a lot of this stuff, you know, I don't know, can be done fairly straightforward, you know, I think anyway, but that's just another way of doing it.
I need some clarification on this one. Jay Zoom said the class system is great since an expensive sort can it be possible to better award system. For example, top people to get their punches in class get a voucher for the next competition. I don't know what he means by that.
Yeah. Instead of getting a punch, you get a gift voucher saying get 50% off your next entry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, you've got a gift voucher. Okay, you can't come to my club.
Oh, this is Sean like this one. Rename master class to open class. Everyone treats it like an achievement or status, but it's just a classification. That goes right back to what Sean and Neil were saying. You know, it's a prestige thing, I guess, to some people.
Yeah.
Steve says if winning is important enough to sandbag, you should maybe try a different sport. I agree with that.
Yeah, but honestly, whenever there's money involved, there's always going to be somebody that's going to find a way to, you know, manipulate the system or the rules to their advantage. I mean, it's just human nature.
Look, I'm probably the most honest guy in the world, but if Sean and I have a $50 bet, I'm going to find a way to get that $50.
Oh yeah, I can attest to that. I mean, straight out, that guy will kneecap me in the stand while I'm shooting. You know.
Neil's on the money with that one. American Shotgunner app does this, and it makes perfect sense. If you guys haven't checked that out, man, you guys, Sean, you really need to get on that. And try it. That's the website that Joe Finizzi and his buddy made.
Okay.
Wonderful, man. You can go in there, look up anybody, yourself or whatever, and it's got all your averages and if you're progressing or not progressing and how you stack up against everybody else. Really cool website.
I'm gonna have to look at that. That just sounds like my cup of tea.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, like,
I'll make a note of that. Shotgunner, American Shotgunner.
yeah. That is a very good website. So, well, come on, guys, give us your ideas. I'm talking to all the people in the chat here. We're looking for more ideas. Anything we can propose to the NSCA that's not out of context here.
Well, I mean, we've seen a lot of changes, Jason, even since we started shooting registered targets. I mean, if you remember, one of the people we used to shoot with, I'm not going to mention names, basically punched up the majority of their punches by shooting sub-gauge, and they no longer award punches for sub-gauge events.
Yeah.
There was a reason for that. You know what I mean? Because you could go out and shoot 20 gauge, 28, 410, and be a master class and never compete in a main event, right, Nikki?
Yes. Yeah, that helped a lot.
Okay, with that in mind, Nikki, here's a question for you, you and Neil. What has been in the history of the NSCA the most definitive, well-made change to the system? What was most effective? What rule, what change was made that made the biggest impact?
Neil's way older, so I'm waiting for him to answer.
Oh, well.
Thanks, Nikki.
Keep
You're
it
still
friendly
prettier, though.
now. Keep it friendly.
Oh, man.
Oh, uh, that's a good question, Jason. I think probably, and it's a broad answer, but I think the establishment of Masterclass.
You think
At what
that's
point did we go? Was AA the top, and then when did they institute Master?
I want to say it was 2003. Is that right, Neil?
It sounds about right, or 4.
Yeah.
2003, that was, let me think, that was the US Open at George Hopkins that got rained out. And George went around with a bucket asking for money for grass seed. That's the 2003. I think it was after that.
Okay.
Or would it have been, 2000 Open was at Claythorne. I can't answer that question. Nikki's going to have to look through the archives to find out when we introduced Masterclass.
Yes. I definitely don't know that one off the top of my head.
Don't look now, Nikki.
wasn't planning on-
what about in your tenure with the NSCA, Nikki? What have you seen that's like you feel like made a big impact or a big change?
I think I would have to say the separation of subgauge. It was definitely something that everybody was apprehensive about going into doing, but it definitely helped a lot with, like, exactly like Sean said, the people that were just punching up, shooting their subgauge events. And, I see it pretty much every day when I'm doing classification reviews on people. There's some people that are still dominating subgauge and they're actually going backwards in their 12 gauge now. There's people that, you can only be one class below, your subgauge can only be one class below your 12 gauge, but your 12 gauge can be several classes below your subgauge. And we've got some people that are going that direction.
Huh, interesting.
Anthony's got a question for you, Nikki. I'm sorry, Neil. Hold your thought for just a second. Anthony says, I do have another question. Nikki, I punched up and didn't even know it due to wrong classes being in my class. How long does it take once a tourney ends to update the NSCA website member history?
So the club has up to 15 days to submit everything to us at headquarters. So, that being said, not everybody's always on time. There are late shoots. We monitor those very closely. I will say Score Chaser's done a very good job of getting their clubs to do things in a more timely, automated manner. So we are seeing an improvement on that. But yes, Anthony, that does happen from time to time. That's why we always highly recommend, and it's actually part of the rule book, that each member tracks their punches as they're receiving them to help prevent that from happening.
Yeah, that's something that I've seen, even if a shoot is really good about submitting all that data right at the end of the shoot, you're also talking there's probably 100 shoots on an average weekend across the country that all of that has to be entered in, right, Nikki, to the NSCA website
Yes.
starting on Monday. So it takes a while.
And I've made it a point over the last couple of years with our staff. We've got one lady in particular Lori, who enters our shoots. She's really good about, as we get in the really big shoots, even if we don't have all the, all of the documents that we need, but we've got the scores, making sure that those scores get updated before. We see it a lot during the Florida run, at the beginning of the year, making sure those go ahead and get updated and entered to help keep up with those punch counts. This year, of course, was a whole different can of worms, but going from the US Open to Texas State, we do try to keep up with at least the majors, the real big ones, getting updated. But you can punch up obviously at a monthly and it may not catch up with your shoot history for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. And I was just going to ask this question, but the Pakistani Flash beat me to it. This is a friend of ours, Bilal. What's up, Bilal? He says, why don't you have direct APIs with Score Chaser? And I think, listen, the three of you on the other screen boxes know more than this clown does. Is there a way that Score Chaser could say, here's the information, and it automatically, like computer program app, some kind of algorithm would update the NSCA website for the participants at that shoot?
It is actually still I'm not going to say a manual process on our end, but it does take somebody in our office to actually open that file and upload it. Like we get it as an automated file, but it actually still takes a manual process to upload it into our system.
Okay.
And then, of course, you're still reliant on whoever's on the club end providing that information. Some may do it Sunday night, the moment that shoot closes. Some may wait till Tuesday morning when they get back in the office because they took Monday off. There's a lot of variables there, but it is getting better. I will promise you that.
Well, if you go back to, forgive me, I think it was WinScore was previous to Score Chaser.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was an older system. I have no idea. I don't know anything about technology, but I know we would go to shoots. I had punched from I don't know, whatever, C to B or something at that time. And I knew I was in B class, but it didn't show up on the NSCA website for like a month and a half. So, I mean, it is getting better, to your credit. Neil, here's one. LF said, update to previous question. Would mandatory down class, no refusal, with a tighter CCFR requirement as you rise in class rank, sort individuals out fairly and quickly? So mandatory down class, you don't get a refusal, with a tighter CCFR requirement as you rise in class. So as the classes go up, I think he's meaning in addition with the punches, a CCFR requirement.
Yeah, so you change the CCFR number depending on what class you're in. Am I reading that correct?
I think that's, Sean, is that how you read it?
With a
So if
tighter
you made it-
CCFR requirement, I'm not sure.
Well,
If you
currently there is no CCFR requirement for going up in class, just punches.
But there is for downclassing. They have a CCFR rating for downclassing.
Correct.
Right.
He said correct in the comments.
Would it sort individuals out fairly quickly? See, I'm guessing again with that CCFR thing, we're talking about somebody that sort of shoots fairly locally, because you've got to, if you get above the number to qualify for the shoot, the 500 number or the 300, whatever the number is, then the CCFR doesn't really apply to you because you've already reached the mandatory requirement for number of targets. Is that statement right, Nikki?
Say that again one more time.
If I reach the mandatory requirement for targets for a shoot, then the CCFR doesn't come into play.
So the only time the CCFR ever comes into play is with downclassing.
I know, but the correct. But wait a minute, I've got it here somewhere. I've got to read this. If a shooter has accumulated fewer than the following required number of punches, okay, that's punches. If 500 targets register more for eligible for end of year review. So if I've reached the 500 targets, I'm eligible for year end review. The CCFR doesn't come into play.
No, actually, that is when the CCFR comes into play. For you to even be eligible, period, you have to have shot a minimum number of targets, which is the 500. Then if you have, then you have the punches and the CCFR that both come into play together.
Okay. See, I read that wrong.
And that's for downclassing, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
I think what he's proposing is for upclassing. Have a CCFR requirement
in addition to the punches. And he said, for example, and here it is, I'll bring it up on the screen, like a master of a 0.25 CCFR.
Yeah,
and
I
A
see
class.
where yeah, I see exactly where he's going with that.
And I've got another comment here I'm going to bring up.
See, currently the CCFR is 0.4 across the board, isn't it?
For
Yeah.
down
Yes,
classing.
yeah, it is.
So you could manipulate or change the numbers by having a different CCFR set for each class.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I can't wait to bring this one up.
hey, you cut me off a minute ago.
Yeah. What was going to say? Sorry.
We was talking, I forget what we was talking about, but one thing that I would like to see is now we've chopped off sub-gauge into their class. I want to chop off FITAS and have their class separate from sporting.
That's what I was going to bring up.
You're full of shit.
No. So, in regards to punches at large events, what if? And I don't want to take them. I don't want to take punches away from side events because then people won't shoot them. But what if we decrease the number? What I'm getting at is, okay, use my dumb butt for example. All of my wins last year, I only had, I think, 1 or 2 in class. The rest of them all came from super sporting. So, what if you decrease the side event punches to an extent and made the main event more valuable? Is there any validity in that?
That's a thought, isn't it?
You know, because like we keep picking on Jacklink because it's so huge now, but I think they have like 3 prelims. Next year they're going to have 2 different. Like I think they have a prelim for the super sporting, okay, and a super sporting, and they've got all these other side events. Of course, your typical sub gauges and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, they've got a whole host of 12 gauge events, VTask, 3 different prelims, 2 different super sportings, an IDO's Cup. I mean, there's just, you know, what if you decrease the number of available punches in side events and put more value into the main event? Because that's where your larger number of entries are anyway.
That's a good point. I'd have to think about that a little bit because
Jace Zoom said, yes, please, because I suck at VTask.
yeah, and you went off at a tangent. My point was to make FITAS a separate category. So you've got Master AA in FITAS like we do in subgauge. Separate it from sporting.
Yes.
No, don't like that idea.
Yeah, no, I do. I said yes. No, I like it. Nikki and Sean are being really quiet over there.
I like the idea. It's just if you're going to do it to the Jack Links, then why not do it for every other tournament?
No, all tournaments, Sean.
Okay.
I'm just saying make the side events less valuable.
But does that hurt a club when they're trying to sell events? Does that make shooting the super sporting less appealing? Does it make shooting FITASC less appealing?
No, you
if
can
you're going
still
to spend $130 to go shoot a super sporting event at a big tournament, but you only get, if you win where you would normally get 4 punches, and let's say you win, you only get 1 punch. Is that going to deter some shooters? And I think it might. Because it's still, I mean, if you go to the Jack Links and you win the super sporting, that's still a hell of an accomplishment.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
But the way it is structured now, 45 or more in your class, you're getting punches for 10th place, dude.
Well, and maybe that's what needs to change more than anything is like start bumping some of those up to like we're seeing these big tournaments. I mean, regionals, even some of the bigger state shoots, U.S. Open, Jack Links. Maybe we need to start looking at the top tier being like 100 or 150 shooters versus 45. Maybe spreading that out more and minimizing it. So, like, right now, I think if there's 15 shooters in a class, you get punches for first, second, and third. Is that right, Nikki?
Oh, sorry, I put myself on mute. First, second, and third is, yes, 15 or more, or 10
15
to
or more.
14.
So maybe another way we could look at this is say, okay, instead of giving, if you're going to give 3 places, which I don't think that's out of the question for a 15-person class in a local shoot, maybe instead of the 4-2-1, we do like 2-1-1 or 3-2-1 as far as punches goes, to take that down a little bit, and then when you get to the bigger events, that's when you give out the 4 punches for the higher placements instead of 2, or I don't know. I mean, just that would make a little more sense to me as far as like, which gives more weight to bigger events because it's going to be harder. It's going to be more people competing against it. And if you place well at Jack Links, I don't care if it's 5-stand, FITASC, super sporting, it means more than winning your local club event where you only competed against 20 or 25 shooters. That's my opinion.
This is the current structure, and you can see here, you go down to 45 or more. I mean, 6th place is getting punches still, and then you take the national championship and open, it's punching clear back to 10th place.
And that's fine. I mean, I think that's more than fair based on the amount of people that shoot that type of stuff. But, Jason, it. I mean, here in Ohio, it's not hard to get 35, 40 people in a class at a decent shoot. When we were bringing 106, like last weekend, I shot at Hillendale, there was almost 170 people just at a monthly tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So there was 28 people in AA.
It's an interesting question and an interesting concept. I don't know. Do you think it would complicate things too much?
Well, that's the whole thing. Anything you do is going to complicate things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, Kansas just had the Kansas State and FITASC champion at Lasada. And, okay, was the FITASC a side event? Well, no.
Exactly.
It was the state championship and the FITASC championship. It wasn't a side event. It was a second event, but it wasn't a side event. So you got to be careful about what you call side events. I think anyway. When we had Texas State, Anthony had what did he have, Nikki? New Jersey State shoot plus a FITASC Grand Prix.
Mm-hmm.
Was the FITASC Grand Prix a side event, or was the New Jersey State a side event? Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah. Well, I guess it would have to be how something's deemed. If it's a state shoot and the FITASC is included with it, and that's a state championship, then that's not a side event. That's one of the main events.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin said, and this goes back to the first rule proposal that we reviewed, and Neil said it was dumb. I have seen a few friends punched up classes and never won anything. Shouldn't you have to at least win your class in a shoot before moving up? That goes back to what we talked about earlier.
See, that's that point. Let's just give punches to the winner.
I agree. That would be awesome.
Because then, obviously, Kevin's friends there, that would not have happened because they would have had to have won whatever class they're in to gain punches to move up to the next one.
Right. Jay Zoom said, Neil, back in the EU, what are some successes with their class system that you think can be applied here, or has that already been done?
Well, I think we agree that we can't use an averages system here because of the different degree of target difficulty or ease. So unless we used sort of an adjusted average type formula where the winning score was the home run, if you follow me, and the averages was based off of that, we would still run into the same. Well, we wouldn't, because when I was a member of the CPSA, regardless, the top or the bottom certain percent went down. You didn't earn punches. You got above a certain, I forget what it was. Let's say your average in English sporting was 92. Well, then you were automatically then in AA as it was then, or maybe AAA now. They had separate averages for FITAS and, of course, for skeet and down the line and stuff like that. So you had different averages for different disciplines, all governed by the same organization, the CPSA.
Doesn't the CCFR kind of take up for some of that based on the downclassing, Nikki? I mean, because
no, because if you had totally an averages based system, you would set up whatever the criteria is, however many is in that class at the end. There is no year-end review. You take the bottom, I'm going to make the numbers up. You take the bottom 10% and move them down a class.
Yeah. I get it.
And, the class below, they've already moved up because they've reached the average required for that particular class. So they've moved up as long as they've reached that average. And I guess they still do, I don't know. They would publish a book every year with everybody's average in it across all disciplines for every class. So, but, and people still say that they don't like it. There's a lot of people over there, they go, the punch system is a lot better than the average system.
Yeah.
So, it's difficult.
Sean, I'm going to let you take this next one. And before you comment, he's got a second comment to this. I'll post when you're done reading it there.
Okay. Sean Monahan says, would putting any shooter that is sponsored on a team or gets free gear, i.e. free targets, free ammo, free firearms in a class by themselves, this would put the weekend warriors in the norm? And then DCBA, AA masterclass, and all of the people who get free stuff in a pro class. If you are getting free stuff, you are a pro. Well, I'm going to disagree with that.
And I do too. And I'll tell you, you go ahead with your reason why.
Well, I mean, to be fair, there are a lot of great vendors in our sport that try to help people out as much as they possibly can. You especially see it like on the youth side of things, So let's take Rhino Chokes, for instance. I mean, how many younger kids do we see that are competing at NSCA events, just because Rhino gives them a couple of free chokes or fits their gun or does some porting for them and doesn't charge them and just, hey, whatever. Does that make them a pro? I don't think so. I mean, it's very easy when you're talking about quote unquote getting free stuff in the sport, there are people at the top of the game that are sponsored by, gun manufacturers, ammo manufacturers, and stuff like that. They get everything free all year long, but they're competing year round. And I understand that, but that's not really the reality of everybody that would be considered a sponsored shooter. There's clubs that sponsor local shooters that give free targets away so that a shooter can practice. There are Bear Pelt. I mean, Bear Pelt gives a lot of vests away to a lot of different shooters, and they're on the Bear Pelt quote unquote pro team. But again, I mean, does that really make somebody a pro because they got something free?
No.
That's a fine line. It's a very gray area for me.
Right.
Totally agree with you, Sean. It's whatever we can do to help industry, whether it be a patch or a name on the back or something, we need to do it. Are they pros because they do it? No. Now, there are some pros that do get financial reward for advertising using it, but that's that. I believe
Well-
they're very few and far between.
Yeah, and that goes back to that sponsorship episode we did. Some people are just marketable. I mean, they, whether they have a big social media presence or whatever, and you can't penalize a company that's trying to get good, good advertising for their product. So,
I agree.
Chad said increase master to 40 and AA to 30. We've talked about that. He's obviously late to the thing. Jay Zoom said more punches in the main event, but that wouldn't. No, so it's not more punches for the main event. It would remain what it is what I was proposing, and less punches for side events. That's what I was proposing. Chad said reduce punches on side events. Anyone that wins Super Sport should not get the same amount of punches that someone that wins the main event. That's what I was getting at. Jason says newer shooter here. I've got a couple of prelims, generally speaking, and prelims typically softer targets. I've shot a couple of prelims, excuse me. Generally speaking, our prelims typically softer targets. I think that all depends on the venue and the target setter, right, Neil?
Yeah. Typically, yes. At nationals, we sort of the K Cup is, let's call that the prelim. That's the biggest 100 bird shoot in the world. I think we've got about 1,900 people signed up for that. And yes, that's set a little bit easier as an introduction. People have fun, some silly targets that jump off of ramps or disappear down tubes or whatever it might be. Are we keeping you up, Nikki? But yeah, typically a prelim may be a tad easier.
Yeah.
That next comment from Doc Woolley is pretty valid, Jason.
Which one, Sean? He's got
one right below that one from Jay Zoom at 9:51 p.m.
In PA, okay, here we go. In PA, we only have single event or two at a tournament. No one would ever punch up if points are reduced. No. Guys, I'm saying leave the punches alone for main events. Just reduce the amount of punches available for side events. That's what I was getting at. So,
well, and I think the point is too, we tend to always look at things based on the reality of where it is where we shoot. Here in Ohio, and Jason, when you used to live here, there's a half a dozen clubs that throw registered shoots every month. So it's very easy to travel around and gain punches just because there's so many different tournaments going on. Yeah. Meanwhile, you live in another state like, I don't know, again, South Dakota, Idaho, maybe they only have a shoot every 3 months, or maybe when you go to a shoot, there's barely 3 or 4 people in your class. If you make things harder for those people, is that fair? I mean, again, it's as Neil has said, targets are so varying in complexity all over the country. I think the same can be said for just the local area where you shoot at. And, having a state like Georgia, Texas, Florida, Ohio, where there's lots of clubs, lots of tournaments going on, and lots of shooters is a far cry different than states that don't have as many available.
Yeah. Nikki, you have been way too quiet over there. Did you run out of wine?
I did.
Well,
pour that woman a glass.
You could pour yourself a coffee and put some of this good Taconic bourbon cream in it.
I'm just waiting on my shipment.
Or if you're like Neil, you can just have the Taconic pre-made old fashioned here, already in the bottle, ready to go with the bitters. Yes, I had to do a little advertising. So, this has been great. I mean, we've had a lot of discussion, a lot of ideas on things. Nikki, is it still available on the website if somebody has something they'd like to email, maybe a thought or an idea? They're catching this when it's not live later tomorrow, whatever. They can still go on the NSCA website and contact somebody there, right?
Yep. Just look for my name and send me an email.
Okay. We'll put Neil's phone number at the bottom of this. You can call and bother him anytime you want. He's laughing.
Really big.
Really big. Make sure you put it above my email in bigger letters.
Right.
Bigger font size.
Thank you.
Before we let everybody go, if there's any last minute
ideas or questions, throw it out there real quick. If not, I will be sharing this link. Well, Nikki and Neil both have it. They can share it with the NSCA. They can come in and see all the comments. Will be right on the YouTube. If you're watching this later, if you're catching this video afterwards, after it's live, you can still comment in the comment section. They're going to see it. So feel free to give any ideas or suggestions or comments. Love to hear it. This was all about being a little bit of a think tank, if you will. We're getting ready to go into the EC meeting here. I think, Neil, you said the 24th of this month.
Correct.
To discuss some of these proposed changes that I've proposed and that other people have proposed. So, and understand we're not, Neil, regardless of what you think, I'm not complaining. I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to fix the game that I love, because like Nikki said, this is obviously the biggest topic. You know, it's the biggest amount of complaining that goes on.
Hey, you two do a great job. There's no doubt about that, getting the word out and stuff like that. And it's very rarely do we get the opportunity, me being part of the EC, Nikki being part of the NSCA, to sort of see what people are thinking. It's really handy to get people's views so that when we're in an EC meeting, we go, hey, you know, the general consensus is this, or people don't like that. You know, I would love to see sort of a sort of some ideas come together from this for the classification system and all different aspects. It's a very complicated, cumbersome system at the moment. Get some ideas out there, and maybe, you know, instead of leaving it to the delegates, let's have something maybe like a referendum where each member gets a shout in it. You know, I like this one, I don't like that one. We should be able to at least get a majority feedback on some of the ideas and go, hey, I like that, or I don't. It's simple, but hey, you know, I can agree to disagree with you forever. You know that. I don't mean anything by it. And also, I'd like to say that, you know, we spoke about quite a bit of stuff on here, and although I'm a member of the EC, that my views are not those necessarily of other members of the EC.
Yeah. And that, you know, one more thing too, if you are intimidated by Nikki, because she's a very intimidating person, you can always reach out to your local delegate. That information is available on the website as well. Who your local delegate is, you can always email them, and they can send it into the NSCA that way. So yeah, there's lots of ways that you can reach somebody at the NSCA. Of course, I'm picking on Nikki, but we love Nikki, and she does a great job, and we appreciate her, everything that she does, and her being here with this podcast. Also, Anthony says, does this mean no podcast dropping this week? Incorrect. There is a podcast coming out tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. 5 a.m. Eastern. So, and I will tease everybody just a little bit here. We have the great Jamie Peckham, world-renowned target setter, is going to come on tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. So look for that podcast. Really good, really interesting. Jamie's a great guy, great target setter, and he's going to give you some perspective on some things. So,
but there will not be a podcast next week, right, Jason? Because the
next week, that is correct. Next week, meaning the week of the Northeast Regional. Jay Zoom said, love the idea of super final for each class, half the punches for side events, and separating FETAS super sporting from the main event class system. So there you go, Neil. You got another vote for your idea.
Good.
I'm trying to look here. I don't think they're just wish prizes and awards were better. I think we all do. If we had Neil's money, everybody would have six-figure purses all over the country. So
if I had my money, I would retire.
That's the best statement I've ever heard. Oh, that's awesome. But no, Neil and Nikki, thank you both very, very much. Appreciate you being part of this, and we loved having you on. You guys are welcome back anytime. Any more news that pops up, we don't necessarily have to do something live. You can always come on a podcast, even if it's just for a short tidbit. I know Michael Hampton joins us once a month here and there when he has time. But if either one of you ever want to come back and talk about anything, you're more than welcome on the show.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Well, thank y'all so much for having me.
Our
First,
pleasure.
first podcast, Nikki.
First podcast ever.
Yeah, and not the last.
Hopefully not the last.
That blows me away. Sean, we need to have Nikki on for like an episode or something. She can just like co-host with us or something.
Yep, she's got all the facts and figures right there.
That'd be fun. We could shut some people down real quick. So we have the facts. So, but thank you everyone for joining us. Sean, Allie, what do we tell everybody every week?
Can't wait to see you all next week on the Dead Pair podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Neil.
guys. Good night,
Thanks,
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.